So I've started getting requests for specific deck builds from some friends. So shout out to Bob. This one's for you. And Bob specifically asked for a kind of deck on a budget. And he pulled a couple K2 SOs. And so I thought this would be a cool place to start. One of the reasons I really like this deck is because it works quite well with Sabine as a leader. You can also swap in Leia or Cassian, and I just make some really little tweaks to it. So I'm going to talk through the deck as a whole and then kind of show you how I tweak it for Cassian or Leia, basically just to have a little variety in what you're doing. I do think that this is a pretty competitive deck. There are a lot of different versions floating out there. You might see some with more or less Bright Hopes or Admiral Akbars or Dodanas. But the basic concept is that you're rushing your opponent to try to kill them as fast as possible. Ideally, on turn one, you want to get either a Battlefield Marine or a Green Squadron A-Wing, maybe Sabine, depending on who you're up against. And all of those are super strong turn ones that can probably kill whatever your opponent plays if you need to and stay alive, or start hammering on base. It might take 2 turns for your opponent to destroy them. You're hoping to maybe draw into a wing leader at that point to turn your Green Squadron A-Wing from a 1-3 with Raid 2 to a 3-5 with Raid 2. So you can really start going on base. And the idea with every card in here is basically just keep the pressure on, right? There's a lot of options to ramp up from 2 to 3. Once you get to 4, a lot of times you're hoping to play K2 or maybe a Sabine and an A-Wing or something like that. And then Sabine deploys so early that the Steadfast Battalion becomes really, really good. A lot of times you're using Energy Conversion Lab to ambush in K2SO or a Steadfast Battalion. Since both of them have Overwhelm, they can spill damage onto the base, and that's really strong. Guerrilla Attack Pod is kind of your finisher. Hopefully you've won before you even get to the point where you would play it. But if you're playing Sabine right, you probably have a base with 15 or more damage on it. So when you play this, you can ready it and then attack with it. It also combos quite nicely with Energy Conversion Lab. So if you haven't used it on K2SO or Steadfast Battalion, or even earlier on something like a Fleet Lieutenant, you can use Energy Conversion Lab to ambush in the Guerrilla Attack Pod, kill something, probably take some damage back, then ready it, right, with the when played ability. So if you kill, let's say, a Fleet Lieutenant that was a 3-3, now it's ready, and it's a 7-3 because it took 3 damage and it has grit. So it causes a lot of problems for your opponent. And then For a Cause I Believe In is another finisher. This one reveals the top 4 cards of your deck. For each heroism card revealed this way, you deal a damage to an enemy base. And then you can discard any of the revealed cards and put the top back in any order. Almost every card in the deck is heroism. The only exceptions are 2 tubes and the Steadfast Battalion. So some people don't run 2 tubes in this deck. I think he adds quite a bit to the gas pedal. So a lot of times I'll sneak 1 or 2 in there. If I'm playing Leia instead of Sabine, obviously you need a red base, right, to make things the same. So you could play Tarkin Town or a common base. And it's just a little bit more focus on rebels. Pretty much everything in here is a rebel already, except for the Steadfast Battalion, right? But you might bring in things like rebel synthesizers, for example. You might bring in more copies of Bright Hope, which, in a mirror match or against a Sabine, your opponent's planning on going pretty heavy in space. So that's kind of like 6 extra health to your base. And then if I'm playing Cassian in this build, and there's plenty of other colors that you can build these leaders in, but if I'm playing Cassian, I'll go for a little bit more control than what I have in here. The Alliance Dispatcher works really nicely with Cassian because of all the card draw. A little resource acceleration, which is kind of what the Dispatcher is, works really nicely to be able to play more of those cards. And then you can play him a little bit more controlling with Open Fire and Consortium Star Viper. Maybe some extra Rebel Assaults. And so I hope that's helpful. All in, I think for this deck, if you bought a box or two, you're probably able to get into the rest of the deck for maybe 10 or 15 bucks if you were buying this from scratch. Right now, the K2s and the Red 3s and the 4 Cause I believe in are a little on the pricier side. You're probably looking at $30 or $40 to get all in, and you'd have 3 pretty good decks, and you could kind of, like I do, play with the cards in here depending on what leader you want to run. So I hope that's helpful, and if you have specific decks that you'd like me to cover, feel free to let me know.